If you want more Michigan stories that sit in the uncomfortable space between record and explanation, make sure you're subscribed before we start. A lot of these accounts exist only because someone bothered to write them down. Camp Grayling is one of the last places you'd expect mystery. It's the largest National Guard training facility in the United States. Tens of thousands of acres, restricted airspace, live fire exercises, constant monitoring. In other words, it's a place where very little should go unseen. And yet, for decades, soldiers training at Camp Grayling have reported strange lights appearing during night exercises, lights that weren't scheduled, weren't identified, and in some cases, weren't explained afterward. These weren't stories told years later around a campfire. They were reports made by people trained to observe, identify, and document what they see. Camp Grayling sits in northern Michigan, surrounded by forests, wetlands, and open sky. At night, light pollution is minimal. Stars are bright. Aircraft are easy to spot. That clarity is part of what makes the reports unsettling. Because when something unfamiliar shows up, it stands out immediately. Over the years, soldiers have described lights appearing above the tree line or moving across the horizon during training exercises. Some accounts describe single lights hovering silently. Others describe multiple lights moving in formation or changing direction suddenly. In several cases, the lights were seen by more than one person at the same time. That matters. Misidentification happens, fatigue happens, stress happens, but shared sightings narrow the margin for error. The most common explanation offered is flares. Camp Grayling uses flares regularly during night training. Soldiers are familiar with them, their brightness, their color, their descent rate. But many reports specifically note that no flares were scheduled and that the lights did not behave like flares. They didn't fall, they didn't burn out predictably, they didn't leave smoke trails. Some lights hovered, others moved horizontally. Some appeared to accelerate or change direction abruptly. Another explanation is aircraft. Camp Grayling operates under restricted airspace, but military aircraft do train in and around the area. Helicopters, jets, and drones are all possibilities. Again, soldiers are trained to recognize aircraft lighting patterns. Several reports specifically note that the lights made no sound and did not match known aircraft profiles. Then there's the timing. Many sightings occurred during exercises where units were isolated, moving through wooded terrain at night, relying on night vision or low-light conditions. That's when unfamiliar lights become impossible to ignore. One recurring detail in these accounts is silence. No engine noise, no rotor wash, no distant hum, just light. In some cases, the lights appeared briefly and vanished. In others, they remained visible long enough for soldiers to point them out, discuss them, and attempt to identify them, and then they were gone. What makes Camp Grayling particularly interesting is how often unexplained reports come from military training areas in general. This isn't unique to Michigan. Training sites are remote, they're dark, they're controlled environments, and they're full of trained observers. If something unusual appears, it's more likely to be noticed and documented. That doesn't mean every report is mysterious, but it does mean these places generate a disproportionate number of unexplained observations. Some researchers suggest atmospheric phenomena. Northern Michigan experiences temperature inversions, humidity shifts, and light refraction that can cause distant light sources to appear distorted or displaced. Headlights from far-off roads, light from towns reflecting off cloud layers, astronomical objects appearing brighter than expected. These explanations account for some sightings, but again, not all. Especially when lights appear to move against the wind, change direction sharply, or remain stationary for extended periods. Another factor is the overlap between training schedules and classified activity. It's possible some lights were related to testing or operations not disclosed to all units present. That happens, but that explanation creates its own problem. Because some reports note that even after exercises concluded, no clarification was given. No, that was us. No briefing correction, no official explanation. just silence. And silence, especially in a place built on documentation, has a way of sticking with people. What's striking about Camp Grayling accounts is how restrained they are. There's no dramatic language, no claims of contact, no leaps to conclusions, just statements like, "We saw lights we couldn't identify." And for many soldiers, that's where the story ends. They finish training, they rotate out, they go home. The lights stay part of the landscape. Northern Michigan itself has a long history of reported strange lights, from the Paulding Light in the Upper Peninsula to unexplained aerial sightings over the Great Lakes. Camp Grayling sits right in the middle of that geography, which raises an uncomfortable question. Is the base producing the sightings? Or is it simply one of the few places where people are trained, positioned, and expected to notice them? Because if lights appear over forests where no one is watching, there's no report. At Camp Grayling, someone is always watching and writing it down. That doesn't mean there's one answer. Some sightings were probably flares, some were aircraft, some were atmospheric effects. But some remain unresolved, not because they're extraordinary, but because nothing ordinary fit cleanly enough to close the report. And that's what keeps the story alive, not speculation. Not legends, just unanswered observations in a place where answers are supposed to exist. If you've trained at Camp Grayling, lived nearby, or heard firsthand accounts about the lights, leave a comment. Local and firsthand memory fills in gaps that official records never do. And if you want more long-form Michigan stories grounded in real places, real reports, and unresolved questions, make sure you're subscribed. Because sometimes the most interesting mysteries aren't hidden. They're logged, filed, and left without a conclusion.